Hey everybody, welcome to the Animation Conversation. I'm Rusty here with my co-host.
What's up, party people? It's your old pal F.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Animation Conversation. I'm Rusty here with my pal.
Hey everybody, what's up, party people? It's your old pal F.
There we go, F. So today we've got a special guest.
We are gonna break the internet again.
Yeah, we're gonna let F run with this one. This is another one of F's buddies from animation's past.
That's right. I could go down this fella's resume, but it would just be so lengthy and so.
It's actually available online at erictrueheart.com if you're interested in seeing his full resume.
And as Rusty has just revealed, my old pal from both Klasky Chupo and Invader Zim, Eric Trueheart, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, hello. First of all, welcome to me. You're not supposed to welcome the hosts. I'm trying to be very, polite, but I realize I've completely inverted the relationship by saying welcome. So let's just forget I said that. And my resume is not that extensive. But Invader Zim is near the front of it. So I will give you that. But thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to see you. You and I have probably not spoken or seen each other's faces in this type of capacity or in any type of capacity in over a decade, probably. So this is very exciting for me. And what's going to be great is I'm going to enrage Invader Zim fans by insisting that we spend the whole time talking about your time on Klasky Chupo.
Oh, great! I mean, as a PA.
That's the thing is I've watched a lot of interviews that you've done on other podcasts and things like that, and a lot of it is geared towards Invader Zim, and that's one of the things that me and F are trying to do with this podcast is go away from the traditional questions that you're being asked about the stuff that that you're most known for, because I already know what you're known for. I want to know all the other things that you've done, because if it's that fascinating of a thing that you've done Invader Zim, there's got to be a slew of other things that are fascinating.
Well, I did run guns for the CIA
in
Nicaragua in 1986.
Okay.
I'm now finally allowed to talk about that.
The whole Freeway Ricky Ross thing. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing more fun than an angry frothing mob of Invader Zim fans. So let's really piss them off just by now.
Yeah. I don't know what I would have to tell them now at this point that they haven't heard already, but I can make stuff up.
One of the first things I always and this has probably driven you nuts for many, many years, but whenever I introduce you, one of the first things that always pops into my head is Eric here is a Harvard grad. And now, growing up in the Boone Hicks of Kalamazoo, Michigan, Harvard was sort of like Oz or Wonderland. It was one of those places you heard about,
like a prison HBO made a series about.
Right? Yeah. No, it was like Wonderland or Narnia. It was like this magical place that you weren't sure actually existed. But now, when you were attending Harvard, did you dream of scripting for aliens and robots, or?
In a way I did. Harvard is an interesting place, and it is a tough place too, as I learned very quickly. I was, coming out of high school and the sort of person I was in high school, and then getting into college, like I was a bit of I guess this goes for a lot of people who are like 18, but I was a bit of a neurotic mess. And so probably didn't make the most of my education experience there that I could have. However, what I will say is that they have, Harvard is a very academic institution. So if you're studying science, you're studying government, or if you're studying, history, philosophy, those sorts of things, mathematics, they got you. If you're studying literature, you want to think. When it comes to actually making things, which is what I wanted to do, like make movies and stuff, they're not as into the idea of you making things. They're into the idea of you studying things.
Interesting.
And so they have what they call, I wanted to sort of major in film, and they have what they call a visual studies department. Actually, it's visual and environmental studies, because it includes architecture in the built environment. It covers everything from film, photography, architecture, painting, sculpture, drawing. And they take 20 people a year into that major, and my grades were kind of shitty my first. So I didn't get
he's
in.
a real wordsmith, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, well, hey, look, as a screenwriter, you write colloquial dialogue. That's your job. So, you don't want to come up with words that an actor is going to have trouble saying.
Right.
So, unless that character that they're playing says words that most people have trouble saying.
Exactly.
So I was not able to get into that and study like I wanted to. And so I sort of spent the rest of the time finding the easiest degree I could get, which was an English degree. And I was not back then sort of what I would say on top of my game enough to like try out for the Lampoon or anything like that.
I was gonna say they have a long tradition of comedy and that kind of parody and that kind of writing. What was the environment like there for that? Was there did you fall in with a group of other people who were like, yeah, we're the next generation of?
Yeah, I didn't, and if I had gotten on the Lampoon, I might have. I was very much, kind of a loner type guy I had a few friends and that sort of thing, but was not, as like I said, it was not as outgoing. I did not take it much advantage of as I should. And I always say that the Lampoon is a very competitive thing to get into. Even more so now, apparently. Apparently, it's even worse now than it's ever been because
Wow.
and what's interesting is that the people just sort of a few years before I got there in the Lampoon, people like Conan O'Brien and now names escaping
Greg
me.
Daniels,
writer on The Simpsons, and there was a bunch of people in the Lampoon who went on to do all kinds of cool things, like work The Simpsons and
King of the Hill.
Conan
Actually, Greg Daniels. Greg Daniels did King of the Hill. He was also a part of that National Lampoon.
Yeah, and I was talking to one of those guys who again I'm so blank on. He was head of the WGA for a while, so I was talking about strike stuff. Patrick Verone, and he was an awesome, amazing guy. And he was saying, like, because we talked about the subject of the so-called quote Harvard Mafia came up, which is this theory in which if you went to Harvard, you've got this amazing job waiting for you in Hollywood, and everyone who went to Harvard watches each other's back, which is complete bullshit. It doesn't happen at all. But he said I don't think there's so much a mafia, but there was that group of people who wrote for the Lampoon during that period, who sort of had a lot of same point of view on things and had a lot of the same goals, and sort of everybody sort of like went off into the entertainment business at the same time to all do all kinds of interesting things. And they all sort of knew each other from them. So it wasn't so much a mafia as a group of people who knew each other, and then were out to do crime organized in a way that would benefit their families by stealing goods, selling them. I'm actually describing an actual mafia. Sorry.
No, it's funny. You're the second guest we've had on this show, and you're the second guest to describe his school as having had a mafia, because our first guest was Rob Renzetti, the creator of My Life as a Teenage Robot, who described the Cal Arts mafia.
Right.
You've got the Harvard Lampoon. You've got the Harvard with the
Harvard and the Lampoon
mafia. And it's funny because each time either of you mention those things, you mentioned you weren't you didn't feel either compelled or worthy or whatever to even try and get in that group. I felt the same way about Cal Arts. I never bothered applying to Cal Arts because I knew that it would take me. But you at least got into Harvard.
I did get into Harvard. Yeah. I mean, I had trouble getting out of bed in that period of my life. So getting into the Lampoon and actually having to talk to a bunch of people all the time was probably more than I was capable of. So
a young Eric Trueheart graduates with a Harvard English degree.
Yep.
What then set your sails to the sunny shores of Los Angeles?
Well, I had spent a year. I went back to my hometown for about a year because family hookup was like, oh, hey, we know this guy working at a who owns a little film production company. How'd you like to work there? And I said, well, there's a job set up, and sure, why not? And I'll go back to my hometown for a little while. And this is Rochester, New York. Which is a city that really wants to be interesting, and has not figured out how to pull it off. But it was the birthplace of Kodak and a lot of things. I think on some level it wishes it could be Portland.
Yeah.
But there's too many people who don't even know what Portland is, so it's just not going to happen. But I went there for a while. I worked for this little film and video production company making like bad local ads and like point of sale trade show videos, and I spent I literally edited 11 separate videos for DuPont herbicides that were going to be mailed by VHS tapes to farmers all over the Midwest.
That is awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any of
greatest
those
thing ever?
Do you happen to know where any of those tapes are?
This is really fascinating, because this is something you and I should have talked about ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew this about you, and yet this is how I got my start in animation as well. Is there was a local commercial house that did local commercials and stuff like that, and they did every now and then they do little bits of animation. And whenever people ask me how do I get my start, because there's this huge conundrum, the whole you can't get a job without experience and you can't get experience without a job. I always tell everybody, every town has at least one of these things, one of these local little production houses.
Yeah.
And for me anyway, it was a great place to get, sort of experience. And it sounds like you not only, you learned editing and stuff there. Yes. I mean,
yeah. And I will say this, and I didn't mean to cut off your partner there, because I know you two started at the same time. So, and John's volume is a little higher for whatever reason.
I'm more obnoxious.
Okay. Well, I've learned to accommodate that. I learned edit. So yeah, the one good thing about this place is that and they were nice people and everything was cool, but I just began to get depressed as fuck working on just this stuff. And but I learned they had one of the first non-linear editing systems, and in 1990 whatever it was, 2 or 3 or whatever, and they had there were 2 systems back then. One was called Avid and the other was called EMC2. And they, of course, invested in the wrong system, EMC2, and Avid went on to become the industry standard for a while there. And but I learned nonlinear editing, which nobody knew at that point. And just the whole concept of nonlinear editing is something that I've been able to carry with me on my own projects forever. That's been like a lifelong skill. And I also learned Photoshop. I actually paid for Photoshop version 2.0 with my own money and learned Photoshop back then, and have stuck with Photoshop ever since, until it got too stupid in an expensive subscription system and you couldn't bootleg it anymore. So I mean, look, my thought was, if I'm not earning a living with Photoshop, I don't need to pay. I paid for it back in 1993. Right. So I feel like I have legacy rights. But anyway, both of those things were skills. I will always be grateful to learning those skills at that place. But at a certain point, I'm like, I can't make another one of these videos. I decided I had to move to Los Angeles. And this might be the other piece of advice you give these people. Eventually you have to move to Los Angeles, and the big thing, or New York, or or Atlanta, or any place that's doing fun stuff. Like if you want to get an entertainment is done out of certain places, but these days it's more remote. You can probably hook yourself up a lot of places actually, now that everything's so remote. But I moved to Los Angeles because I was like, even if I'm working on something terrible, I want to be working on something that everyone who's watching it has chosen to watch, as opposed to the shit between the shows, or I have to watch this because it's my job, or it's playing on a video screen at a trade show. I felt like nothing we did was anything someone would voluntarily watch. So I decided to move to LA, and
did you know people in LA?
One person. I knew one person in LA. And
so, how did you wind up? Because when I first met you, you were at Klasky Chupo on the Wild Thornberries, in at least the building, the same building that I was in. How did you wind up at Klasky Chupo? And tell me how that all came to be, because I don't think I've ever heard this story.
That's because it's not that interesting. No, I mean, Well, I mean, long story short, I'd been taking classes at the Groundlings. A friend of mine who I made in those classes was working at Klasky Chupo and sort of like one of their marketing director. He was working very closely with like Arlene and Gabor, who owned the studio. He was, giving them back rubs or whatever. That's not true. None of that is true. But he was working with Arlene and Gabor. And anyway, he said, and I had just graduated first of all, grad school. I went to USC for grad school. Not necessary if you want to write for cartoons, but just sort of how it happened. And he said, "Oh, do you want a job? There's a PA job at the Thornberrys." And I said, "Yeah, of course." So like a lot of things, and so I got in. And you'll be making photocopies and maybe even getting people's coffee, which nobody asked me to do, and just doing all the grunt work. And I'm like, "That's fine. I'll be in the loop. It'll be awesome." And that's what I did.
No,
Actually, did I do that before grad school? No, I may have done it before grad school. Now that I think about it, I don't remember.
it's funny, isn't it? Like the more I think back on this really, really early, canon material, the fuzzier it all gets. Like
I know. What year did you work on Thornberrys? What year was that?
it was either 96 or
1954?
97.
Okay, that may
Around
have
thereabouts.
been right after I graduated. That may have been. I
And
always in my head it's always 1966 or 65.
right.
The
Well, see, what's
Beatles
funny,
Revolver had just come out. You know.
what's funny is whenever I think back to those times, I think to myself, okay, it was either 1996 or 1997, and then I think to being at our pal Sean Murray's house when 1999 became the year 2000,
Mhm.
and how much had happened in between. Like 4 years now feels like that, whereas back
Yeah.
then that felt like an eternity. Like so much
Yeah.
happened. So how did you go from being a PA at Klasky Chupo to your first full-time writing?
Right. I stabbed a man outside of a Ralph's, and in his dying breath, he passed me a piece of his soul. And it
Nice.
turns out that piece of that soul owed Nickelodeon a favor. And the next day, a man dressed entirely in orange turned up at my door and punched me in the neck, which,
the neck.
yeah, in the neck. Fortunately, the side of the neck, not the front of the neck. That could have been trouble. And I said, "Ow, don't do that." And he said,
No.
"Well, you now have a karmic obligation," and put me in the back of a van and drove me around several times so I wouldn't know where we were going, but then drove up in front of Nickelodeon and I saw the sign. So it's like, dude, this isn't, you're bad at your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the truth is, I had come off of at a USC. I was lucky I had somebody who wanted to manage me. And they used to be a lawyer. They were a lawyer and they were a fantastic lawyer. And one of the things you learn later in life is that the skills that make you a fantastic lawyer make you a terrible manager, because lawyers are out to look for problems and ways you're going to get fucked over, and managers are always out to look for solutions and opportunities. So you need both, I guess. But anyway, they got me a job. They got me an agent at a place called Writers and Artists, I think, which no longer exists, like most agencies. And they said, "Oh, hey, there's this Nickelodeon show happening, and it's going about an alien, blah blah blah." And I had written a spec South Park back then, and it was, if I read it now, I'd be horrified, I'm sure. and that was back to I don't know what the style is now, but I think it is still. Once upon a time, they wanted to see, if you wanted to be a writer, they wanted to see that you'd written a spec episode of somebody else's show,
Right.
to prove that you could write in some other voice. So everyone had like a spec Seinfeld or a spec
Right.
Simpsons or a spec, I had a spec South Park. And it was they gave it to Jonan Vasquez, who was running the show. And apparently he liked it enough. And probably because I had this thing where like Cartman, eats Cartman, like they all accidentally take acid, and Cartman ends up starting a religion based around bacon or something like that. And because it was a pork joke, I think Jonan was really into it. So I met with Mary Harrington, and who was the executive, and she said, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you. Glad to, they always say in the business they meet you to see, they want to meet you in person to quote, make sure you don't have two heads. It basically make sure you're not crazy or have or smell bad." And she said, "Oh, this is the show, Jonah Vasquez, and blah blah blah. Here, I'll give you some of Jonah's comics, and why don't you, write, and if you want to pitch some story ideas." Jonah really liked your thing. And that weekend I was going up to the Bay Area to see my sister. And when I got there and was hanging out, I started reading Squee. I think it was Squee or Johnny. I think it was Squee. And and the whole time I'm like, I don't know, Nickelodeon, man. I'm like, this is the direction I want to go in my career. I was really hoping for something a little weirder, a little edgier. I was hoping I'd get on The Simpsons or something like that. And then I get up there and I start reading Jonah's comics, and I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this could be cool.
Yeah.
And they're letting him do a Nickelodeon show. This could be really cool. So I came back, I pitched him a few ideas. The ones he liked was, and you write up little one sentence pictures, a few sentences. And one he liked was Bad Bad Rubber Piggy. Went away and wrote the outline for that. And basically they said, why don't we bring you on for 13 weeks? And if that works out, we'll keep you. And if it doesn't, we will silence you forever. And
as it had turned out, you who had begun at Klasky Csupo got brought on as a writer there, and like half of the storyboard staff on that show were also people from the Wild Thornberrys, people that I had learned a storyboard from. And as I've famously told, because they were all getting in there, I had the opportunity to storyboard on Invader Zim as well. And regretfully, I said, no, I don't want to board. I want to be a character designer. And oddly enough, Jonan, hired me to be a character designer. But the point is, all these people from Klasky Csupo were suddenly on Invader Zim. And now you tell me if I'm remembering this incorrectly, but
you're remembering this incorrectly.
Fantastic.
No, you want me to hear it first? I'm sorry. Okay.
And again, I'll apologize to Rusty for not letting him talk. But
nah, you're good. I'm like DJ Khaled. You know what I mean? I'm bringing it all together. Another one.
At the time that I got hired, you got hired, and we all got brought on. The response that everyone had whenever you told them, I'm working on a show at Nickelodeon created by Jonan Vasquez. They were like, Jonan Vasquez is doing a show at Nickelodeon. That was their first response. And then the second response is, how do I get on that show? Like, this is the show. Was it like that for you? Like, this was the show everyone wanted to get on.
Well, I wasn't really in the animation loop, so I didn't know. Like, I just had gotten on the show. Like, I'd gone from doing being a PA at Klasky, and I don't even remember what my next job was in between then, but then getting this opportunity to do the thing, and so getting on Zim. And so I hadn't been surrounding myself with animation people like, oh my god, everyone wants to be on Invader Zim. I just wandered in one day as the writer, and there was the people who were the writing side is already there, which is basically Rob Hummel and Jonan, and then Roman Dirge, who had an office next to mine that he wasn't in half the time. And
for a brief period, TV's Frank.
Oh yeah, and for a brief period, Frank Conniff, TV's Frank, was there, who was really God. He's such a funny guy, and you could tell it was not a good fit almost immediately, which was such a shame because he's so funny, but in a different way. So I didn't know that everyone wanted to be on it.
Speaking of good fits, boy, once you really sort of. Once your feet hit the floor and you were off and running writing, you mentioned earlier finding a voice for the show. I feel like you stood out very early on as someone who spoke the show's language like just fluently and with great. You made it look easy, which is always a sign of someone with an exceptional talent, because Invader Zim did have its own language. No one would say things like, shut up. They'd say, shut your giant gate,
shut your noise tube or
right. Yeah. And I mean, Bad Bad Rubber Piggy, that's a fan favorite.
Oh, well, that's very nice of the fans. Rusty, is that a fan favorite, would you say? I'm trying to compensate now.
No. Is it? I'm not sure. No, the question I asked earlier was, do you have any of those DuPont VHS tapes left? Is what I was
No,
asking.
no, I don't.
I actually
don't.
I collect VHS tapes, so I was just curious. That would be a funny one to have. That'd be a really weird, funny one to have.
Yeah, it was this real quick side. It was this campaign called No Till Neighbors because they had a no-till herbicide. The idea was so farmers every year had to till their soil after they got the crops to plow the herbs on. I said, no, you don't need to till your soil anymore. You just spray this chemical on it, and it'll burn down all the weeds and all the leftover vegetation, and then you just let it rot into your soil, and then you don't have to till anything. So whether this was a good idea or not, I don't know. All I know is I was paid a very low wage to edit these, and that was my job. So yeah, if you can, Rusty, if you can ever track down, and I guarantee you, any farmer who got this in the mail, 95% of them did not watch it.
Probably trashed it, yeah.
And anyone who did save that tape, for that tape to still be around somewhere, it would have to have survived how many different times in your life, you'd be like, we got to throw some of this stuff away.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody saves the direct mail VHS tapes.
Nobody saves them. They're hard to find. No, yeah, for sure. So that's a for the fans of the show. That's a task for you guys too. Go find that VHS tape. Yes. There you go. Go hunt it down. Find it for us. That'd be cool.
And yeah, I guarantee you, there's somebody out there in the world right now watching that tape and doing horrible things while they're watching it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure there's a farmer who saved it since 1993, and
in a basement with a single naked light bulb on, cockroaches crawling all over him, and he's just watching it over and
Yeah, maybe he's duct taped his ankles to a chair just on purpose.
Watch it again.
Yeah, he bought the last remaining Connex of DuPont tapes or the DuPont tapes, and he made a chair out of it. And that's what he's sitting in. He's sitting in a big chair of tapes.
I want to be immersed in no-till neighbors. You are all my no-till neighbors now.
Now you and I had had sort of fleeting pleasantries at Klasky Chupo, but I don't feel like we really got to know each other until Invader Zim, and I feel like what wound up being the impetus to all that, in addition to the fact that everyone on that show, I feel like was at least of a certain mindset in that we all loved the show and thought, oh my gosh, this is different from anything we had ever even hoped to work on, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But right out of the gate, we all started playing video games in the break room.
Yes.
And whenever people ask me, what was your favorite part about, working on Invader Zim, I always go back to playing Super Bombad Racing with Eric Trueheart, Sean Murray, Ian, and Chris Graham. Because you guys would stay late.
And, oh yeah, how you said you made it look easy. I made it look easy by staying very late at night, and this was back in the day. If you're a writer, part of, and I'm sure as an artist you deal with this too, but part of it is just learning how to do your craft. In terms of how to produce, and writing is very kind of abstract and kind of hard.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't really sort of learn the process of it until later, and so. I would stay when I had scripts to do. I would stay until 3 a.m. just to get my pages out, which is something I realized I was making my life far more difficult than it needed to be. But I was at that point at least smart enough to have had a system in place of all right, I need to have the rough draft done at least a day before it's actually due, so I can spend the day before cleaning it up.
Right.
Which is something some people don't learn. We would stay late. All the board artists stayed late too, because it was hard boarding. It was, as far as I could tell.
That's why I wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah. The fun part of it, I will say, for the board, you talked to Sean and Graham more than all those people, more than I did, and Ian, was that it felt like, whereas other shows wanted to sort of rein the board artists in a lot of ways, all right, don't do anything too complicated, don't do anything too weird. We got to Jonan and the whole show's aesthetic was no, go nuts. You have an idea for something cool, do it. And I think it felt like for a lot of the board artists, it was their opportunity to go and do stuff that maybe they've always wanted to do, but you really get a chance to do that working on Rugrats. And so I think when I would go and write stuff, I would know who was boarding it, and I would write stuff knowing whether or not knowing hopefully that the board artists, whether was going to really enjoy this thing, to be like, oh, I bet he's going to really like, I'm going to try to write something that, and not on purpose, not like completely steering the story in a different direction, but just being like, oh, I bet Ian will like this gag,
right?
And
see, this speaks to something that I've been screaming about for years and years and years, is that I feel like because when I was at Klasky Chupo, the writers and the board artists never had any contact with one another. I couldn't name a single writer for that show. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really backwards and wrong. It's like we should be collaborating together. And I feel like Invader Zim was the first show I'd ever worked on, and I'd worked on a couple by the time Invader Zim had come along, where the board artists and the writers were chumming around with one another, and I would watch you guys, interact, and I would watch you guys like literally collaborate, and I think that was one of the major strengths of the show.
I absolutely agree, and I am to this day floored by the fact that it is basically standard practice to keep the writers and the artists separate. That's insane to me. And I don't know where that started. I don't know. I mean, I think it may have started like early days of The Simpsons. It may also started when you have like a different, even in Los Angeles, a different animation company doing all of the art while the writers are, holed up in some other studio.
Right.
But it's insane. And it's even I was working over at Titmouse on the Turbo show, and the writers and the artists were in different buildings, and I'm like, first of all, it's Titmouse, it's the whole place looks like an abandoned frat house or something, but which I love, but I'm like, why are we not like just next to these people so they can just ask us questions, or we can ask them questions, or they can give us a hard time? There's this weird like Berlin Wall between them, where just the two sides will occasionally meet for these meetings, where the directors will talk to the writers about like the script, and then grill, and then if like changes are needed, then there's more negotiations or whatever. And it wasn't like that at all. I mean, it was great, because literally, like, there was a board artist started like a couple of doors down from my office, and we played video games together, and I if I would stay late, I'd walk in and just see how Ian and Chris were doing, and it was just it was crazy. And it was I didn't realize how casual that was. And he could and I remember Ian just talking to me one time about the challenge. He had to draw a thing where Zim got something out of an Irken vending machine, and he's like, so I have to come up with a design basically that reads vending machine but also reads alien, and also is able to do this thing. And just little things that you start to understand the thought processes that go into everybody else's job, which is a really, really useful thing for someone to have.
Well, and that was also the genesis of yet another fan favorite episode. I know I was at least in the room.
No, you absolutely were. You said pancakes, I believe.
Everyone was sitting around talking about how there should just be an episode to give the board artists a break. And that should be super, super easy. And what did that episode wind up being, Eric?
Well, I'll tell you, it wound up, and this is in my book, the medium-sized book of Zim strips, where I tell the whole story of this, but how this idea genesised in a room full of artists, and talking about how they needed a break. I had forgotten it was about needing a break, but I think we talked about it was. I know that the idea, let's do something mundane. It became Zim Eats Waffles.
Yes,
and I had been wanting to do. I was trying to see if we could do an episode with the longest single sustained shot of animation that had ever been made.
Right.
I was like, can we do something where it's like one straight shot? Like, and how long can we, like the beginning of Goodfellas, where it's the walk thing. But this is TV, and we're not going to be able to do like long shots through corridors and then Joe Pesci murdering people, which was the episode I pitched, just called Joe Pesci Murders People originally. And they were like, Joe Pesci's not in this show, he's a real actor. And I'm like, I know. And we can't really just have people, it's a kids network, we can't have people. And it's like, yeah, I know. So why did you pitch this? And I said, Because and then at that moment I realized the mistake I had made.
Yeah.
And I should have caught it earlier, and I felt the blood drain out of me, and I apologized, and it wasn't enough. They made me sit in the dark closet for a while, the Nickelodeon orange closet, which is painted orange on the inside, but there's no light, so you can't see it.
Eric, you do the crime, anyway, you got to do the time.
You got to do the time. So
the walls are just weeping ooze.
But that was how Zim Eats Waffles came to be.
That's how it came about. And then you said, let's do something mundane. And I think you'd even made a pancakes joke. And I said, well, wait a minute. What if we do nothing? It's nothing but that, and why pancakes became waffles or whatever, I don't know. I said, well, maybe we can do an episode where it's nothing but that. And then I had to figure out how to set it up, what the actual story was, what the actual conflict was, what the actual stakes were. And so and so that became the Zim Eats Waffles. And I do chronicle the entire story of how I figured up the story, and then how long the longest actually sustained piece of animation was, right. Which is, I think it's only like maybe a minute and a half or something like that. So I know we didn't beat a record or anything, but
oh well.
And then and
so which actually, I mean, I'm gonna want to go back to this later, but later on you and I wound up working together on Yin Yang Yo at Disney, which was a real sort of convergence of everything, because I had worked, of course, with Steve Marmel on The Fairly Odd Parents, and I had worked with you on Invader Zim, and so Yin Yang Yo was a real sort of worlds colliding sort of thing, but one of the script pitches, because I got to write on that show as well, and that show to me didn't get its fair shake.
It absolutely didn't.
B, that was a show where I would sit in on the writers' meetings. Like I would sit with you and Sib and Adria and Steve, and I would be there for the writers' meetings. But I remember pitching a show idea where it was just yin and yang, and the entire episode took place in their version of the tundra. So it was just white brown the whole time, and I'm like, this is going to be the episode where this is going to be our Zim Eats Waffles, where we're going to be able to catch a breather. We don't have to do any backgrounds, and we never got to do it, and I'm still
Steve was very practical when it came to a lot of stuff, and very impractical when it came to other stuff, because he's a very funny guy. And a great guy to work for. By the way, all of you out there, if you ever get a chance to work for Steve Marmel, we encourage that you do so. But it's a great career move, and it's just a lot of fun. But I even pitched an idea trying to do this whole like long sustained shot thing of a road trip episode where basically the camera would be locked on the back seat where Yin and Yang would be sitting the whole time. And Master Yo would be driving in the front and occasionally shouting back to them and one thing or another, but it would be try to just keep a lock-off shot on the back seat of the car as the two of them fought with each other the whole way to whatever destination that we're trying to get to.
See, contrary to what people might think, networks are not always that keen to really let you roll the dice on super experimental scripts like that, where you're not following the formula of just bringing the funny every second.
Which is a shame. By the way, for those who don't know, you've probably talked about Yin Yang Yo on the podcast before. It was a show on Disney XD back then with about two kung fu rabbits and their grumpy panda master, created by Bob Boyle, who went on.
That was part of the great Fairly Odd Parents migration, where suddenly Fairly Odd Parents lost its supervising director, me, and its two co-producers, Steve Marmel and Bob Boyle, all to go over onto Rusty. Did you ever watch Yin Yang Yo?
I'm gonna do the justice of the podcast here, and in the essence of research and history. I'm gonna go back into the archives and pull that one out and watch it again for sure. I've never seen it, so I won't be watching it again. I'll be watching it for the first time. But my sister knows it. My sister has mentioned knowing it, so.
Does she have any positive things to say about it, or is she just incensed that it's even existence?
She just knows that it existed. She was a little bit too old for it as well around the time that it came out. She's 6 years younger than me, and I'm 32, so we're all around the age for some of these shows. But like Fairly Odd Parents, stuff like that for sure. Invader Zim, definitely. I was 9 when it came out, so yeah, for sure those kind of shows. But I think I was just a little too old. I was definitely way too old for. If I was watching Yin Yang Go at that time, there was definitely something wrong. I was way far away from cartoons.
You were deep into the woods, lighting off fireworks at that point. I'm guessing illegal fireworks. And, that's good. That's
smoking weed, drinking booze, chasing women, that kind of thing. Not really paying attention. So actually, I have a few questions.
Tire fires behind the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Big tire fires.
Just me?
No, I was participating in. I participated in a tire fire too, maybe. Allegedly. So my questions for you mainly were surrounding some really off the wall kind of stuff. I've tried to find it online, but I couldn't. Stoners versus zombies.
Oh, you won't find that online.
Yeah, I didn't think I would. I tried to find it. I didn't think I would, but
there's nothing. And I'll tell you about that. By the way, if you hear like lawnmower, I don't know if you can hear like the lawnmower that's going by the yard nearby here. So if you do, just know it wasn't my idea.
It's a wood chipper with Steve Buscemi's body in it.
Yeah, no, every time. It turns out those are hard to get a hold of in bulk. So no, Stoner versus Zombies, and this is for people who work outside Hollywood, is one of the many projects in Hollywood that get optioned and then don't get produced. And this is what they call development in the if you're reading like whatever website you're getting your entertainment news, say, well, currently in development is this movie about your favorite obscure Marvel character, and this actor is attached, and it will probably never happen. Because the way development works and all. So anyway, long story short, I wrote a writing partner I went to school with. And we wrote Stoners versus Zombies. We wrote back when we were writing spec scripts, spec features, hoping we could get a feature gig. And it's about a small town in the middle of a small desert town where everybody is extremely just well behaved and clean cut, fresh faced, on board with everything that society is handing them. And, except for these two guys, what were their names? One was Moondog, the other was Ike and Moondog, who were basically the town's resident stoner high school kids.
Yeah.
And it takes place of high school kids. And they just, and it's prom, the prom is coming up. It's like the 18th birthday, and they're like, fuck the prom, man. Like maybe like some of us were when we were in high school, like prom's stupid. We're not going to do this conformist garbage. And they're huge weed heads, and so they're going to throw the anti-prom up in this abandoned lot, and of course nobody shows up because everybody is too town. Well, long story short, a zombie outbreak happens during the prom, and as you soon discover, the only people immune to it are the stoners, because marijuana makes you immune to the zombie virus.
Yeah,
and
naturally.
So the people left to save the town are Ike and Moondog and like the local punk lesbian girl written back in the day when that was a really hard thing to be, and the cheerleader who was secretly a stoner, and the shop teacher, who at the time we imagined would be great if it was played by Bruce Campbell, who was also a lifelong stoner. And you discover a whole underground plot to turns out the reason everyone is so happy and smiley all the time is because there's a secret government plan to try to drug people into being into being conformist, and unfortunately that drug goes wrong and turns everybody into zombies, and the only solution is to smoke weed. In fact, I think if you can get a zombie to smoke weed, it will cure them. So it's
funny.
This is
very much like this pro-stoner ideology.
That's funny.
Yeah, I know. This is what, and I think this is one of the reasons why I instantly enjoyed your company when I started to get to know you, is because one of the things you and I have in common is I recognized in you, you have lots of ideas. Like, you have lots and lots of ideas. I mean, correct
Oh,
me if
don't
I'm
worry,
wrong.
that quality has been beaten out of me by the entertainment
Well,
business.
sure.
So.
No, no, you talk about development. It's called development hell for a reason.
Mhm.
Development, as Eric said, it's this phase where you're sort of making the show, but not really, and they can cut
Mhm.
you loose at any time. But you know, one of the things that I recognized about you when I met you right away is that you had lots of ideas and you were out there to hustle them. And
Mhm.
and I mean that in the best of luck because I was doing the exact same thing. Like you and
Yeah,
I were
you
hustling.
were a total hustler. Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that you had done at the time that I recall just watching and seeing with complete just awe and amazement that I thought was really great was the Ministry of Unknown Science,
Oh yes.
which
Yeah.
was sort of you and your pals, kids in the hall sort of sketch comedy thing. And was that was in development for a while, was it not?
Well, yeah, no. So it's for those who didn't happen to live in Los Angeles in the early 2000s and didn't happen to go down to the warehouse where we were doing these shows. Yeah, the Ministry of Unknown Science was a sketch comedy group that we did with three of my friends and and every all the other of our creative friends who like wanted to edit or direct things or shoot things, and we were doing a multimedia comedy experience. We were inspired by things like, obviously everyone of our generation inspired by Monty Python, and it was
Yeah.
basically a sketch comedy show loosely based around a narrative that went through it, and four scientists in a secret lab developing things that always sort of went wrong. And so a scene with the four scientists would transition into a scene with a sketch, just by
Right.
with sort of links. So it was like a little bit like Mr. Show, but with a story running through it. And it was all multimedia too. Like we would shoot videos and we were on
Right.
stage, and then so you'd walk off stage into a video and all kinds of stuff like that. And yeah, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, and some of the videos we had to take down because there's some jokes in there that aren't really appropriate for now that don't seem wrong, but seem kind of tone deaf by today's standards.
Yeah.
But they're not racist, but they are tone deaf, which is like we had back in that day. There was a lot of talk about people complaining about they're sending our jobs to Mexico. And so we did an episode, our pilot episode that we did was about the ministry having to outsource their space program to Mexico because of budget cuts. And, so we get a person who's named Lopez who wants to become, he calls it a Mexinaut. And it's one of these sort of things where it's like, it's based on politics. We're not talking down, we're not punching down.
Right.
But it does seem kind of tone deaf these days to be making those kind of jokes. So we kind of had to take it down. And by the way, we sold a Mexican space program Mexinaut shirt at the shows. And I know, friends, so many people, including Jonan himself, who is Latino,
Yeah.
said I have Latino friends, and that was like their favorite shirt for a long
Oh,
time.
undoubtedly. It's
Yeah.
so much has changed since then. But now, see those shirts are probably collector's items now.
Yeah, if any exist, right?
What
So
after I had seen that, and then I'd read some more of your scripts and stuff like that, and it was clear very early on that you were a funny guy. I can't remember how it was not that long after we had started working together on Invader Zim that you and I got it in our heads that we were going to do a one-man show together.
that's right.
Do you,
Was it all the Stan Lee stuff?
yeah, Stan Lee, a one-man show.
Yes, because we both did Stan Lee impressions.
Right.
And yours was particularly awesome.
Well, we were gonna write it together, and it was just one of those stupid things where two knuckleheads at work, just sort of mess around together, and we would just improvise these little, bits of Stanley going. It was at that time that
Yeah.
Kirby came into my office, and his pants were around his ankles. He said, "In this panel, we're gonna have Wolverine eating a pie made out of human thumbs."
And
Excelsior.
Excelsior.
And then he
that
would
was
take
the
a shot of
moment I
whiskey.
knew it would be a Titanic hit.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seemed so ridiculous at the time, but now I wish we'd done it.
I know.
Speaking of thumbs, though,
Billionaires.
speaking of thumbs, that kind of leads me into my final. The last question I had for you was about the Steve Odekirk thumb stuff, the Thumbtanic and all that stuff.
I just had a small part, I mean, on those things, but I knew, long story short, I was friends with the guy who was Steve Odekirk's producer named Paul Marshall. Steve Odekirk, by the way, like he directed second Ace Ventura movie. He'd been a writer on In Living Color?
Yeah, it was in Living Color was where he had started. Yeah, that was like his writing career.
He went on to do Kung Pao, Enter the Fist.
That's great. That's gold. That's one of my favorite like teenage movies. I remember being like 15, sneaking out back to smoke a joint, to sneak inside, and then watch Kung Pao 100 times over and over and over.
Yes. Oh yeah, and Steve Odekirk, he was a really funny guy and really nice guy, and that's the thing. Kung Pao was like one of those passion projects he wanted to do for a long time, and when he finally got to do it, I mean, that's the thing. That was one of those movies that is definitely a cult movie coming out. You just know, and it got terrible reviews. But the whole point was that, well, of course it's going to get terrible reviews. It doesn't matter. It's not about that. Yeah. But I think the studios weren't happy with him for that. But just the fact that that's one of his contributions to comedy, I think, should enshrine him forever. But he did the Thumbtanic, where he figured out, because he was big into technology and what you could do in animation, he figured out how to do thumbs. Basically use at the time After Effects to do something that these days probably your phone will do automatically, which is put the eyes on a thumb and on a mouth. And so I did a bunch of just small bit parts throughout all his thumb stuff. I think I may have thrown a couple of pitch gags at a script or two. And then I am actually, and I'm sure this is lost forever, on the DVD for Thumb Wars. I did my chin was Gabba the Butt, which was not a butt, it was my chin, and so it was upside down shot. And I, at the time, because I was in makeup and getting loopy for a long time, I started just improvising the actor at Gabba the Butt as though he were run inside the actor's studio. And so he did a very long monologue. My name, it's just, and this whole sort of like Gabba the Butt interview.
That's hilarious.
That I guess they liked, and they kept, and they stuck it as an extra on the DVD. Nice. But I just
found it actually for $5, the DVD online. The Thumb Wars, the Phantom Cuticle.
And I'm ordering it. If you want to see me as Gabba the Butt behind the scenes, I do believe that is on there as an extra.
Oh, I'm definitely ordering it. Yeah, no, that's happening. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today, because this also is something that has come up in conversations with fans of Invader Zim and people who want to break into the industry in general, is I feel like because whenever anyone asks me, who are your favorite writers, like, you're on my Mount Rushmore of favorite people to work with.
I'm not on my list, but
but one of the things that I think throws a lot of people off is, first of all, I feel like writing is one of those things that a lot of people think they can do, but they can't.
Yeah. It's like until you sit down to do it,
that's becomes not writing, that's typing. Yeah. And one of the things, because one of the other capacities that you and I worked together in was, I got a show that got thrown into development hell at Warner Brothers for a long time called Nightmare Hunters,
which was an awesome show.
Well, I'm actually I'm actually doing it independently now, so we'll.
Oh, right on. Oh.
But what was interesting about that experience was, right out of the gate. Now see this, I've talked about this on the show before. I consider myself a very good writer, because I also have a degree in journalism. I took English, and I did lots and lots of creative writing in college, and I'm very disciplined in the art of writing. However, I'm a terrible screenwriter. And there is a difference, because and people who want to write for cartoons think that they just need to be good writers, and it's like, no, you have to be a good screenwriter. And I was wondering if you if you could speak to the differences between those two things.
No.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes, I can.
What a great show.
Yeah. Good night, everybody. I could, but then the WGA would have to murder me. No, I can, and that's the thing is that there's like, writing is one of the most, and back up a little bit. Yeah, like everyone sort of thinks they can write until they actually have to write something. The advantage of you have, John, being an artist, is that everybody knows almost immediately if they can't draw. Um, and you also know, though, that it takes a lot of practice and a lot of just doing it to really become good at it, and also doing it for animation is also its own set of skills, in the same way that screenwriting is its own set of skills. And screenwriting is drama writing, it's dramatic writing in terms of, and even comedy in terms of figuring out scene structure and conflict, and just kind of, I heard one guy kind of refer to it as a haiku. You're trying to figure out the most efficient way to get the ideas of stories across, and even the ideas of dialogue across, and and having faith when you're writing the script that the actors are going to carry the meaning of the dialogue, whereas every screenwriter their first time overwrites everything, writes way more than they need. But yeah, so like screenwriting is its own, I mean, writing, if you just want to do creative writing, and then that's great. It's very, that in itself is very, kind of right brain, depending on how you're doing it. But screenwriting has a huge left brain component to it, and of figuring out structure and figuring out that sort of stuff. And it can sort of drive you a little bit mad trying to use your right and left brains at the same time. So like, and at the same time, you can become the sort of screenwriter who is so into the structure and the rules and the left brain that what you end up making can be a little bit boring, or predictable, or doesn't really get into anything too crazy. So yeah, screenwriting is the shortest way to think of screenwriting is dramatic writing, and drama is based around conflict and stakes. And basically a character wants something, and they're opposed in getting it, either by another character or by circumstances or by something about themselves, and then they're working to overcome those obstacles to get whatever it is they want, in the face of some kind of stakes that is what they have to gain to what they have to lose. And the stakes can be physical, like if I don't rescue the baby is going to die, or they can be even emotional, like if I don't get on the basketball team, my dad is going to think I'm worthless, and all that sort of stuff. And, or, if which is why in Zim Eats Waffles, we can't just do a show where Zim does nothing but eat waffles. It has to be about Dib planting the camera in Zim's house, desperately wanting to get something, not getting it, calling up, trying to come up with all these ways to try to get it. You're dealing with his frustrations of not getting it. The stakes are there because he's told the swollen eyeball, guys, this really great thing is happening, and they're like constantly, Dib, you're an idiot if you bother us again. So like, and then he calls the FBI, and then we get room for all the jokes of like, the demon squid getting loose. And it is sort of like Dib's like, oh my god, I got this footage, and the camera gets knocked over and he doesn't get the footage of it. And so it's the difference between just, okay, we'll just have Zim eating a plate of waffles for 11 minutes, and shit, we got to build a story around it. And
see, and that's the thing. I think so many people just think it's a matter of, here's my script, and this happens, and that happens. There's a lot more thought that goes into even the simplest of ideas.
So I got one more.
And you need, like, act structure and stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. So I got one more, I guess in wrapping this up, I got one more quick question for you. How did your alcoholic beverage come about being your whiskey and cola? I was kind of interested in that. I saw that you're affiliated with some beverage here.
That is still very much in our public, in our forefront of our consciousness, because this is a tough business to turn a profit in. You think it wouldn't be, but it is very, very, very,
plug
very,
the hell out of it.
Yeah, plug it.
Yeah.
Send me some.
And so I will. My partner Samantha and I, my common law wife Samantha, and myself, she had this idea during the pandemic. We wanted to do something, we were also kind of feeling, the doldrums, and also I was feeling a little bit like, I don't know if I want to continue in this entertainment business that's driving me crazy. And we came up with this idea, and I'm a huge cocktail head, a huge cocktail aficionado. Learning about stuff like Death and Company and those cocktail crafters from mixologists and stuff like that. I'm fascinated by that. We're also, both of us, fascinated by old school sodas and old school craft colas. If you
cool.
live in Los Angeles, there's a place called Galco's Pop Stop, which is awesome. A little store up in Eagle Rock or
no, it's funny you mentioned sodas and artisan sodas and stuff like that. I actually I'm actually recording this podcast live from the home of Dr. Pepper. So like the actual city where Dr. Pepper was created in, Dr. Pepper and Big Red were created in the town that we're recording from. So there you go.
What town is that?
Waco, Texas.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Someone's telling me that there's the Dublin bottling plant in Dublin.
Yeah,
Texas?
it's in Dublin, Texas. Yeah, there is a bottling plant there. There was a lot of controversy and actually a legal battle they had with the main corporation of Dr. Pepper, the Snapple Group, because they were bottling and selling their Dr. Pepper and labeling it, hey, this is special Dr. Pepper and Dublin Dr. Pepper kind of thing. So yeah, that's
yeah. I mean, and I saw the Dublin Dr. Pepper at Galco's. He came, hey. We got the Dublin Dr. Pepper, which I guess is like the original recipe or something like that.
Yeah, it's just sugar instead of corn syrup. That's the only thing it was. It was just sugar instead. That was it. So you could still get the sugar Dr. Pepper with the real sugar in it. So you could still essentially get the Dublin Dr. Pepper, but it's not bottled in Dublin it's not being bottled in the same place. But they have their own colas and drinks that they make now. So they manufacture their own line of sodas that they market out of Dublin.
I'm sitting here enjoying my Invader Zim exclusive beer.
Wow.
Remember these? Autographed by Jonah Vasquez.
Jonah Vasquez. Do you still have the crew mug that I gave out at Christmas?
Oh, you mean?
There you go.
Obey on one side. Yeah,
that's awesome.
A Zim garnish in it. It's delightful.
Yeah, I
Jonah's head.
Side note, before I answer more of your questions about the thing. Yeah, when we worked on Yin Yang Yo, to show you how much Disney didn't care about us. So I for Christmas, I had some custom mugs made, much like I did for Zim, Yin Yang Yo mugs, and gave them out to everybody. And so then, and the show, goes on. It gets canceled as most shows do eventually. And later, I'm back in the Disney offices there to pitch something, and I look over, and they have a glass case displaying the merchandise from all the various shows that they've done recently. And so there's like Kim Possible action figures, and I think there's some Power Rangers stuff in there. And then I get to the Yin Yang Yo stuff, and in there, to show you how little they gave a shit, is a backpack. A Yin Yang Yo backpack, which was never sold, which was given out as like a swag thing to some kids. Maybe some pencils, or perhaps like, I don't know, a bottle of Yin Yang Yo whiteout or something. And then in it too was the coffee mug I gave everyone for Christmas.
Wow.
I'm like, really? That's the thing you put in?
Wow.
I did that. That's there's no merchandise there.
You had those made with your own money.
I know. So I should have snatched the glass and taken it back, but I had a meeting.
That's the kind of guy Eric is, though. He goes out of his way to.
Out of my way to smash the glass on cases and steal things back.
There you go.
But see, now here you are, a beverage on tour.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about it. Okay, so John just froze.
How delicious is it?
Oh, John, you're back. You frozen for a second, and now I think Rusty's no, Rusty hasn't frozen.
No, I'm just really still sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's very zen of you, and that's a skill that some people don't have, particularly me. So, yes, it is called Grizzly's Cosmic Black. GRISLYS, as in like Grizzly Murder. Cosmic Black, as you would expect it to be written. You can see our website at grizzliescosmic.com. Again, GRISLYS cosmic.com. And what it is we set out to make, so canned cocktails were getting huge at the time. And as a cocktail aficionado, I was like, this is cool. We set out to make the most delicious, basically whiskey and Coke.
Okay.
Our feeling was that that's the classic quote. Jack and Coke is one of the most basic cocktails that a lot of people start on that. That's the most basic cocktail you can. It's from the day you got handed a red Solo cup at a party in college where somebody poured Jack Daniels and some Coca-Cola in there, and to the fact, going to shows at bars where the easy just to order a Jack and Coke over the bar and stuff like that. And our feeling was nobody had taken on doing like an elevated gourmet, or dare I say artisanal version of this. And so we set out to make that, and also to make also wrap it in a packaging that was super cool and awesome and arty and out there and weird. And to this I owe Samantha a lot of debt for her creative energy of just sort of driving this stuff and that. And she she was like, oh, I know we can get these artists and stuff. And so we created Grizzly's Cosmic Black. We used an aged high rye bourbon. We didn't use malt alcohol with bourbon flavor. We spent a lot of time engineering our own cola recipe, based on which some people compared to Fentonman's cola. As it turns out, that was not our intention, but it is that kind of level. And because we live in a time where people are trying to watch their sugar intake, and obviously things like hard seltzer are really popular, is that it has no sugar added. It has an artificial sweetener. So if you don't like artificial sweeteners, actually, I have a lot of friends who don't like artificial sweeteners who actually like this. And so we have Grizzly's Cosmic Black, which is a canned either gourmet hard cola or gourmet bourbon and cola, elevated bourbon and cola, whatever you want to call it. And I will say we've won some awards. We have we get a lot of positive response from people who drink it. They say it's delicious. They love it. We've not gotten any attention. Oh, and our mascot is a character named Grizzly Eddie, who is a deep space Yeti. He is a Yeti from another dimension who has brought this delight to Earth.
I was gonna buy some, but they don't. There's no distribution in Texas for it. I went to look to buy some.
If you want to buy it in Texas, first of all, I can hook you up with a friend of mine who sometimes brings some in, but you have to. There's a way to buy it. So I'll give everyone this link to get our thing, because recently our sort of e-commerce has been a pain in the neck and has been in flux. But if you want to get it, go to our link tree, which is that, linktr.ee.
For sure.
Grizzly's Cosmic, GRISLYS COSMIC.
Okay.
And there's a link. If you live in California, it's easier to get. If you live in New York City, it's pretty easy to get. Everywhere else, you have to go through another company called Royal Batch that ships stuff all over the country. But the downside is shipping liquid is expensive.
Yeah, it
is actually very expensive. You're like the sort of person who's ordering an $80 bottle of scotch, throwing $15 on the top of that is not really anything you think twice about. If you're ordering a $15 box of whiskey and cola cans, throwing it down another $15 is something you might balk at. So it's a problem, and this is sort of why this is just every single alcohol manufacturer in the country deals with this of how do you get stuff
I actually work for a wine distribution company, so I understand some of the logistics and stuff behind it, what you're talking about. So
that's awesome.
All of our listeners need to move heaven and earth to get just crates and crates and crates of this stuff.
We would not object. And here's what I'll say. I think if you order it from Royal Batch, there's still there's a little bundle still where you get a really cool little beanie hat. If you live in California, you can get it delivered for much cheaper. In California, it's like $6 to deliver it. And if you're within certain areas of Los Angeles, they'll drive it to your door. Some dude will show up, and if you don't like dealing with other human beings, you can just pretend not to be home and he'll leave it there. Actually, though, they got to talk to you because it's booze. But go to our link tree and you can buy it either nationwide or you can buy it in California.
I'm gonna give me a case. I want to try some of it. I don't really drink alcohol, but I'm gonna try it just in the sake of.
We will have the link in the description, people.
Cool. It's low ABV. It's only 6% alcohol by volume, so you will not get blackout drunk unless you drink a lot of them, which we don't necessarily recommend because drinking excess. Yes.
Before we go, I've sort of made it a tradition of mine with our one other guest that we've had before to always end the interview with one really, really uncomfortable question that puts our guest in a really awkward position. So I'm going to do that to you now because this is the question that I get asked most about Invader Zim, and I would love for you to either confirm or deny it.
Okay.
If there had been another season of the show, was it in fact going to be Invader Dib?
That's in my book, by the way, so you know.
Okay, where do we get your book?
My book is called The Medium-Sized Book of Zim Scripts, which has a bunch of scripts in there and the stories of how they came to be. You can get it on Amazon. I'd rather you didn't. You can get it on BookBaby. I'll get more money. And I think the coupon code on my website might still be valuable. But if you go to, it's like tinyurl/pigwaffles, it'll take you to the BookBaby link. And nice. You know, if you're willing to spend the extra money on the BookBaby, I tell you that it helps independent publishing, and that extra money does go to the author as opposed to like Amazon, in which I get like $3 or something for every one sold. So yeah, the answer to that question is F you. No, the answer to that question for all you want is no. But with the following caveat. So everybody talks about Invader Dib, and everybody talked about they were going to end the series with Dib going to Urk, and it was going to be Invader Dib, and it was going to, be full of explosions and pigs and dog fuckery or whatever, and not that, but and bees, and bees, and here's the Invader Dib thing. They were talking about, we would make a joke, and I think this came out of Jonan or Rob or something like that, but it was like, someone said, "Oh yeah, if you ever did a movie, what'd you do?" It's like, I don't know. It would go like Dib would go to it'd be Invader Dib. It would go to Earth. It's that, but really the reason we kept making the joke was that originally the title of Invader Zim was Invader Zim, and so it was Invader Zim, which got dropped pretty early on. And actually, early on in the scripts, we were sort of like, "Do we put a colon in when we're writing on the title? Do we do that?" So the joke was. So it would be Invader Zim the movie Invader Dib. So it was really a joke about how many colons we could put in one title. So no, there were never any plans to bring Dib to Urk and make it Invader Dib. I mean, who knows if it had gone on that long? Eventually, it's possible that Jonan might have come around to actually wanting to do that idea. But I don't want to say yes or no. By the way, the whole time I'm looking to the side because that's just where my microphone is. I hope you all understand that. So it's possible that maybe in theory it would have come around to do that. But no, that was never serious. That was never, ever serious.
Well, then, regardless, I would encourage everybody to get the book because, again, as someone who was sort of a fly on the wall himself during the Invader Zim days, the stories behind all these episodes is gotta be a great read.
I'll include the link to the beverage and the book in
thank you very much.
The description below.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and
Eric,
I think you'll enjoy the book. Yes, John. Yes, Rusty.
No, I'm not handed over to Rusty to wrap us up, but before any of that happens, I want to be sure to say, my gosh, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you. I have not seen you in years.
I have not set foot in Los Angeles in many, many, many years, but thank you for coming on the show. And
anytime.
I don't think I'm speaking out of school if I say we'd love to have you on again. There's more stories to tell.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would happily be on again after everyone has forgotten about me being on and how disappointed they were. But yeah, no, I'd love to do it again. I can talk about random shit for ages, as I'm sure you know, to your peril.
Yeah, I love it. No, I love it. I loved every bit of it. And so is there anything that you got that you want to plug? Any current projects, anything like that before I sign off? Or
let me think. I mean, just grizzliescosmic.com, and if you Google up the medium-sized book of Zim scripts at BookBaby.
BookBaby. That's bookbaby.com. Yeah.
I've got other things sort of I'm working on, but nothing that's being released right now.
Okay.
So nah, I'm not. I'll just plug those things.
There you go. And, that's perfect. Yeah, that's fine.
Get your books and booze.
Books and booze. So go and order. Yeah, so order the book, bookbaby.com. That's the medium-sized book of Zim scripts, Volume 1, Pigs and Waffles. Right?
Nice.
Okay. That is absolutely correct, sir.
And then you have the beverage, Grizzlies Cosmic Black. So get your beverage, get your book, sip and read a little bit, and dive into some Zim scripts. Yep. So again, thank you for participating in the animation conversation with us. We do appreciate you being on, and I guess that's it. That's been another episode of the animation conversation. I'm Rusty, and
this is your old pal F saying zig zig ah, party people.
Hey guys, you can find us at Instagram and Twitter at Animation Convo. You can find us on YouTube at Animation Conversation, and you can email us at theanimationconversation@gmail.com. Join us again for another animation conversation. This podcast is produced by Rogue Media Network.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.